All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let's pick up page Kuf Mem Hey. Page Kuf Mem Hey. So continuing along in Prishus, giving other examples of areas where, although technically speaking, behaviors are permitted, in an effort to prevent oneself from falling into the we'll call it the pit of sin, the pit of depravity, the pit of negative behavior, a person draws his lines in the realm of that which is permitted in order to prevent one ultimately again from engaging in negative activity. So another example, intimacy with one's wife, of course, is permitted. Mutaras yater gamar. Amnam kvar tiknu tvila labali karyon. So we'll say, for example, Chazal instituted that a Baal Keri, a man who has a seminal emission, should go to the mikvah, which actually again is a fascinating idea. Why is that? So the Gemara says, in order that Talmidei Chachamim should not go ahead and be with their wives like chickens. I guess apparently chickens mate quite frequently, right? Roosters mate quite frequently. So in order that people should think, specifically focus on Talmidei Chachamim, that people should think before they engage in active relations. So we'll say, what does this mean? What this means is Chazal wanted us to think about the things that we do before we do them. The fact that a Baal Keri has to go to the mikvah means that what? That when a man has relations with his wife, he's going to have to think about the fact that afterwards, before he learns or before he davens, he's going to have to go to the mikvah. What that does is it just creates a presence of mind when it comes to intimacy. That suddenly, again, it doesn't become like a rote act, and it doesn't become something that is done without thought, and it doesn't become something that is done just in order to satisfy carnal desires. But there's a thought process that has to accompany it. Because remember, even though of course the act of intimacy is of course permitted, amnam kvarhu matbia ba'atzmo shala adam taiva hazos. We'll say, but it's important to understand that the act of intimacy satisfies a desire, and any time you satisfy a desire, then what? You are bringing yourself closer to the potential of sin. Now again, I will say, to be very, very, very clear, Ramchal, of course, is not saying at all that the act of having the act of intimacy or the act of having a physical relationship with one's spouse, chas v'shalom, is sinful. Not at all. The opposite. We spoke about this in our Shalom Bayis series. The opposite. It's filled with kedusha and filled with simcha and filled with so much beauty. What he's saying over here is to understand, to be mindful of what's happening. When a person engages in an act of intimacy, there's a satisfaction of a desire. Wherever there is a satisfaction of a desire, there's always the possibility to allow that to descend into chaotic, lustful behavior. That's the idea, to be mindful. So Chazal made sure we're mindful by saying that a Baal Keri has to go to the mikvah. So Ramchal is saying, ultimately a person should realize when he satisfies a desire, umisham yachol, page kuf memvav, umisham yachol lihi mashech ela iser. I will say it's possible. Just remember again, what begins with satisfying a desire in a permitted way could unfortunately very quickly descend into negative and inappropriate behavior. Ukima amar Rabbi Sin says an incredible statement in Sanhedrin, Eiver katan yesh ba'adam. So we'll say there is a small part of a person's body, right? A reference to the Eiver, right? A reference to the Makom Milah. So what happens? Masbio raiv. If you satiate it, it is hungry. Mar'ivo savea. It literally translated, if you starve it, it's full. We'll say, what does that mean? That sometimes the more you feed the desire for intimacy, the more you need. Right? The less you go ahead and feed that desire, the more satiated you become. That will say, so just to understand, this is not a statement about frequency of a physical relationship with one's wife. What this is talking about over here is an approach to life. So ultimately, again, the more emphasis a person puts on satisfying his physical desires, the more demanding those physical desires become. versus the more a person goes ahead and conditions himself to, of course, satisfy the desire and, of course, have a healthy and meaningful physical relationship. But that's not the emphasis of my life. Forget about the emphasis of my marriage. That's not the emphasis of my life. Then ultimately, again, a person finds a certain state of satiety. So also here, Ramchal quotes something very interesting. He quotes the behavior of Rabbi Eliezer. That when Rabbi Eliezer would engage in relations, Shahaya Megala Tefach Umechaset Fachayim, Vidome Kimi Shekafa Ushed. So we'll say the Gemara describes over here that Rabbi Eliezer, when engaging in active relations, did so with a sense of extreme modesty. Extreme modesty. He wouldn't fully undress. He would only go ahead and uncover a tefach, and he would engage in the act of relations as if he was being forced to by a shade. Right? We'll say this is not something to emulate. Right? And this is not something ultimately to aspire to. And I want to be clear, nor is the Ramchal saying that this is normative behavior for me and you. That's not what the Ramchal is doing with this. The Ramchal is making a point. Because they both say, remember again, Rabbi Eliezer is on a different level. This is not regular behavior for us. Right? Rabbi Eliezer is on a different plane of existence. What Ramchal is trying to point out over here is that there were great people who were mindful of even permitted intimacy because they understood that intimacy without boundaries, physicality, right? A physical relationship without boundaries could just descend into something so terrible. That's the point that he's trying to make over here. That at the end of the day, Rabbi Eliezer was mindful of the fact that even a permitted relationship could ultimately end up in such a negative spiritual place. And therefore, he took excessive precautions to ensure that it would not become something illicit or inappropriate. So I'll say, so again, another example of precious. So you begin to see, what does precious do? Precious takes a permitted act, right? A permitted act, and says, this permitted act, if left unchecked, ultimately could descend into negativity. And therefore, what do? We go ahead and we draw our lines a little bit before that which is prohibited in order to prevent even the most permitted of acts from descending into something negative and inappropriate. Another example, hamabushim vakishutim. What's when it comes to clothing and accessories or jewelry? So lo his hiram Torah al yafyam o al tavnisam, ela shalo yisa bahem kilayim, via bahem tzitzis, vaz kula mutarim. So we'll say, so what happens when it comes to clothing? So remember again, clothing, jewelry, so the Torah doesn't tell us anything. Rather, the Torah just tells us that halacha l'maaseh, you can't have shatnez, and if you have a four-cornered garment, you have to go ahead and put tzitzis on it. But if you want to buy expensive clothing, okay, Torah doesn't say anything against that. He says, Amnam, milo yedeshem levishas hape'er v'harikma, timashech hagaiva, v'gamaznus yigbaba. So we'll say, but all of us know that sometimes, again, wearing especially expensive things can go ahead and cause gaiva, can cause arrogance, and could sometimes even lead to znus. And again, whenever you get too wrapped up in materialism, so again, it's easy to go ahead and lose yourself in jealousy and desire, all the things that come ultimately again from overindulgence in the material. Ukvar amru zichron livracha, kevan shera hayetzer adam shetola bakevo, memashish begadol salsal b'sara omar zeshali. So he says over here, quotes over from the Medrash that says that as soon as the Yetzer Hara sees that a person is excessively preoccupied with his clothing and with his appearance, ultimately the Yetzer Hara says, I've got that guy, right? That guy's mine, right? I've got my talents, I've got my claws in him. I've already won him over, so to speak, to the dark side. So we'll say, so again, here's another example. So again, is there anything wrong with expensive clothing or with expensive accessories or expensive jewelry? Nothing wrong with it. Just a person has to realize that overindulgence in the material can lead to a variety of different things. Can lead ultimately again to jealousy, could lead to desire, in extreme levels could lead to theft in order to keep up a particular level of lifestyle. So again, I will say, another example of precious, a person may want to draw their boundaries a little bit further in, a little bit closer to home, in order to prevent overindulgence with the material, even though again, overindulgence in the material itself may not be prohibited, but ultimately what it leads to could potentially be catastrophic. All right, so stop over here for today. We'll pick up with this discussion in Meretz Hashem on Monday. All right, so we'll say good morning. Today's daf is Nun Aleph 51. We are picking up on Nun Amud Beis 50b. And we are picking up in Meretz Hashem with B'may Askinon. It is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 lines up from the bottom. Our shir this morning is dedicated by our Talmud Torah sponsors for this month of Kislev, Josh and Becca Friedman, Ili Nishmas, Josh's father, Yisrael Yehuda ben Rav Chaim Rafael, on his first yard site, and Sammy and Malka Esther Sinli Iloi Nishmas, their parents, Yitzchok Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch, and Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. And I will say with that, let us begin. But my asking, I'm supposed to remember again, the Gemara is talking about the concept of ultimately again being mechin something b'machshava, setting something aside or establishing a reality with thought. So also remember again, this came up. This was introduced to us because of the case of ulshin. Rabbi Yochanan came along and said that if you planted ulshin, which is a type of herb, a type of asav, you originally planted it for the purpose of feeding it to your animals. Then what happened? You changed your mind. And you decided ultimately to eat it yourself. The halacha is that it's not makabel tumah until ultimately again it's detached from the ground, and then you once again have a new machshava. You see from here that halacha l'maisa, you can't go ahead and have machshava with something that is mechuber. The Gemara brought a raya to that from the case of the bird. That ultimately, again, the bird itself is not mekabel tumah until when? Even though a bird itself can convey tumah, let me say it differently. Nevelas of tahar can convey tumah bebeis habliya, but if you want the velas of tahar to convey tumas maga, like regular tumas ochlin, it requires machshava. So the Gemara equated the bird in the air ultimately again with the oshun that is mechuber. So the Gemara was trying to prove this from a variety of different cases. The last piece the Gemara pointed out was that ultimately, again, we're talking about the Tarnagol Shabiyafna. So the Gemara is asking, what's the case? So we'll say, if you're talking about an avelas oaf in the cities, lamali machshava. So we'll say, when you have an avela in the cities, it doesn't require machshava. Why is that? This is actually quite interesting. Vatanan, nevelas behema tahora b'chol makom. So we'll say, a nevelas behema tahora in any place is automatically considered to be ochel. Why is that? Because we'll say, obviously, Jews are not going to eat it, but an avelas oftar is absolutely fit for consumption by my Gentile neighbors. Un avelas oftar, but that's an avela we're talking about, an animal. However, an avelas oftar, when it comes to a nevela of an oftahar or chelev fats, bikrachim in tzrichin lo machshava lo hechsher. We'll say in the cities where there is a large Gentile population, it doesn't require machshava, nor does it require hechsher. Why not? Because the assumption is that there are Gentiles who are present who will gladly eat it. So therefore it's automatically considered food. Ela bikfarim. Rather, again, I will say in the villages is a bit different. In the villages, when it comes to nevelas of tahar, it's not so pashut that I'm going to find someone who's going to want to purchase it to eat it. Therefore, it only becomes food b'machshava. Is it really true that ultimately there's an opinion who holds that the nevelas oftar doesn't require machshava? For Hatana, we learned in the Mishnah, nevelas bein b'tamei b'chol makom. We'll say nevelas bein b'tamei. Ultimately, again, if you have a non-kosher animal that dies, that animal, that carcass, is automatically considered ochel in any place. Right? Because halacha l'maisa, the assumption is that there'll be a Gentile who is willing to eat it. However, unevelas oftar b'kfarim, ultimately again, but nevelas of tar in the villages, tzricha machshava, requires machshava because it's not automatically considered food. Ve'ena tzricha hechsher, but ultimately again doesn't necessarily require, or does not require hechsher. I was supposed to say, doesn't require contact with a liquid medium in order to be kabel tumah. Ultimately again, rather it can be makabel tumah even without any kind of hechsher. We'll discuss that in a little bit. Amar Rabbi Zeira bar Chanina liolam bekrach. Ultimately, again, we're dealing really with the bird in the city. And what happened over here? Vigito ma'asto va'aso kikfar. Even though we said that nevelas oftar in the city may ultimately be considered ochel because, again, there's a large Gentile population, because we're talking about a bird that fell into the vat of wine, ultimately, again, the vat itself makes it disgusting, and therefore it's kind of like having a bird carcass in the villages, where ultimately, again, in order for it to be ochel, it requires machshava. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said as follows: Kal v'chomer. We can make a kal v'chomer ultimately, again, for the nevelas of tar. How so? Here we go. So also remember again, if you go ahead and you ingest nevelas of tar. So remember again, what's the halacha with the velas of tar? It conveys tuma bebeis habliya. We've spoken about this many times already. So that happens even without machshava, right? Even without any prior thought about establishing this item as food. And I will say that is tuma chamura, right? It conveys tuma to the guf of the person as well as to the begodim of the person. So im mitame tuma chamura shelo b'machshava. Lo titamet to makala shlo machshava. We'll say should it not certainly go ahead and convey to makala. To makala we'll say is tumas ochlin, even without machshava. Amr lo says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri lo im amet betuma chamura shekein eno yoredes lakach. So also we're going to define this statement as well. Tuma chamura is different. Why? Because they both say it is not subject to the halachos of machshava. So the Gemara says, "My ini yoredas lakach." Well, I'm giving you the answer. What does it mean that by tuma chamura, literally again, it doesn't descend into this discussion? This is what it means to say. Loim amrat betuma top of non aleph betuma chamura shekin ina osek yotzeba. They both say when it comes to tuma chamura, ultimately, remember what happens with Tumachamura. So let's say you ingest nevelas of tahar. So what does that do? That conveys Tuma bebeis habliya. So we'll say ultimately again, that conveys Tuma to the person and to his clothing. So remember again, that person cannot convey Tuma to another person. Because we'll say in general again, a person can makabel Tuma from an avatuma. So ultimately again, that person cannot go ahead and convey Tuma to another person. Yet, Tamar betumakala sha'osek yotzeba. Yet interestingly enough, when it comes to Tumakala, Ochel could go ahead and be metame other Ochel, as Rashi says, midrabanan. Amar lei abai kol dechainu. So this bolsters my argument. Umatuma chamura dekila deina osekiyotzeba. So we'll say when it comes to tuma chamura, which on one hand is kal. How is it kal? How is it lenient? In that we'll say when the person contracts tuma chamura, he cannot convey that to another person. Yet mitame shelo b'machshava, he becomes tamei, right? So we'll say a person becomes tamei with nevelas of tahar bebeis habliya, even if there was not a machshava to make the nevelas of tahar like ochel. It's therefore again certainly tumakala de chamira. Certainly, guess when it comes to tumakala, which is tumas ochlin, right? Which is a lighter form of tuma. Yet it's machmir. In what sense? Da osek ki yotzeba, that halacha lemaisa ochel can convey tuma to other ochel. Eino din shemitame shelo machshava. Certainly again it should convey tuma without machshava as well. Ela amar Rav Sheshes, rather Rav Sheshes said hachi kamar. This is really what it means to say. Lo, im amrit betuma chamura, shekin ina tzricha hechsher, tomar betuma kala shetzricha hechsher. So also what the Gemara is saying is like this. The refutation to Rabbi Yochanan was really as follows. When it comes to Tuma Chamura Bosai is not subject to the concept of Hechsher. Masha'inkin Tuma Kala ultimately again is subject to the halachos of Hechsher. Umitzricha Hechsher, is that true, Bosai, that Nevelas Of requires Hechsher? To which the Gemara says, V'hatinan, Shlosha Dvarim Ne'emar B'Nevelas Of Tar. Bosai, there are three things ultimately again that were said by Nevelas of Tar, right? Three concepts. What are they? Tzricha machshava. Nevelas of Tar also requires machshava. requires a Shabbos. Remember again, machshava means machshavas ochlin, to have in mind to eat it. It only conveys tumah by ingesting, right? Remember again, Nevelas of Torah is unique in that if you touch it, it doesn't convey tumah. It's only if you swallow it, or once you're about to swallow it, does it convey tumah. Ve'ina tzricha hechsher. So we'll say ultimately again, and it does not require hechsher. How so? So the Gemara says, Nihi de hechsher sheretz lo baya, hechsher mayim baya. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. What does it mean? What does it mean ultimately again that it does not require hechsher? And that it doesn't require hechsher in terms of coming in contact with a davar hatameh. I was going to say, I might have thought that what it requires in order to convey tumah is it must come in contact with another davar hatameh, like a sheretz. Kamashlan does not require contact with a davar hatameh, but absolutely requires contact with water. Okay, so the Gemara says, Maishna hechsher sheretz the lo baya. We'll say, why is it that it does not require contact with a davar hatameh in order to acquire tumah status? Because in reality, the Rabbi Shmuel said what? It really shouldn't require even contact with water to be machshirit. The Sanya, the Rabbi Shmuel, I'll call zera zerua. Asher Yizara. So we'll say, so the pasuk over here speaks about again the concept of hechsher tumah and says as follows. Says Ki yipa min nivlasam al kol zera zerua asher yizarea tarhu. If an avela ultimately falls on anything that is planted, right? It is tahar. So we'll say what that's talking about over here is that if a davar hatameh comes in contact with something that is mechuber lekarka, ultimately, again, something that is mechuber, connected to the ground, cannot contract tumah. So the Gemara says over here, Mazraim she'in sofan litame tumah chamura tzrichin hechsher. So we'll say seeds, right, or plants, which ultimately have the ability to go ahead and contract tumah chamura, require hechsher. Af kol she'in sofe litame tumah chamura tzrichin hechsher. So ultimately, again, just like Zro'in Rabosai. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Mazram she'in sofan litami tumachamur tzrichin hechsher. So Rabosai, remember again, seeds, anything that is planted in the ground, ultimately again, will not come to contract tumachamura. Right? Rabosai, again, remember, they'll never become an avatum. They'll never contract tumachamura, and therefore again, they require hechsher. Af kol she'in sofa litami tumachamura tzrichin hechsher. So Rabosai, this creates a paradigm, and the paradigm is any item that is not capable of contracting tumah chamura ultimately requires hechsher. What does this come to exclude? Yatsa nevelas oftar shesofa litame tumah chamura shein tzarech hechsher. So we'll say, what does this exclude? Nevelas oftar, which does ultimately contract tumah chamura. We'll say, what does it mean? Meaning not that it contracts, but it conveys tumah chamura. That if you go ahead and you ingest nevelas oftar, so what does that do? It's metame adam ubigadim. So we'll say the Gemara is creating a paradigm here, or I should say, Tanna Rabbi Shmuel is creating a paradigm, which is that ultimately, again, the paradigm is created from zera, just like zera, which is never capable of ultimately contracting tumah chamura, requires hechsher. So too, only an item that is not capable of contracting tumah chamura, it requires hechsher. Therefore, again, nevelas oftar, which does convey tumah chamura, does not require hechsher. So the Gemara says, Ela amar Rabba v'itim rapapa, shum tumah chamura ba'olam, shum tumah kala ba'olam. So rather, again, Rabba say the Gemara gives an interesting answer. What we're talking about, Rabba say over here, are categories of tumah. Look at Rashi for just a moment. It's Rashi towards the top. It's the first of the shorter lines in Rashi. Shum tumah chamura, shum tumah kala. Loim amrit betumah chamura dinhu shemetame below machshava. Shalom atzinu shum tumah sheshma tumah chamura shetei tzricha hechsher. Tomar betumah kala da ochlin sha'afa pisha zu eina tzricha hechsher. Hare kol ochlin yesh aleim shum tuma kala. So we'll say, we're going back over here as follows. We're going back to clarify the statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri ultimately again made a kal v'chomer. What was this kal v'chomer? If ultimately again mitami tumah chamura shalom machshava, so we'll say if something that is mitami tumah chamura, like nevelas of tahar, right, could convey tumah without machshava, then ultimately again something that has tumah kala, for like tumas ochlin, shouldn't require machshava as well. To which ultimately, again, they responded to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri by saying it's different. Because ultimately, what did they say? They said, "Im amra betuma chamura shekin ina yoredes lakach." So ina yoredes lakach. So we'll say, well, we're answering over. What does it mean? Matuma chamura ina yoredes lakach. What it means is, Rabbi say that ultimately, again, the category of tuma chamura itself is not shayach to machshava. That machshava itself is not a din in the category of tuma chamura, versus machshava is a din in the category of tuma kala. So let's analyze what this means. Does it mean that every single thing in the category of tuma kala requires machshava? Not necessarily, but nevertheless, categorically, tuma kala requires machshava, as opposed to categorically, tuma chamura doesn't require machshava. Amar Rava says, Umod Rabbi Yochanan le'inyan meiser, but ultimately, even Rabbi Yochanan will agree in terms of meiser. The machshava schibor shma machshava. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Rabbi Yochanan will hold that in the realm of meiser, machshava schibor, right? Machshava that you have even when the item is attached to the ground is still significant. Remember again, this was so okay, fine. Even Rabbi Yochanan will agree that machshava schibor by meiser. By meiser, we'll still ultimately again have a frown. So remember again, before Rabbi Yochanan was on record. Remember again, how did this whole thing start? It started with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan by ulshin, right? I planted ulshin. What was my intention? To feed it to who? My animals. And then what happens? While it's still planted in the ground, I have a switch, right? I decide I'm going to eat it myself. What did Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan said that is not considered to be food for tumah purposes, to be makabel tumah, until it's detached and I have a machshavas ochlin on it. So now comes along Rava, and Rava says, even though Rabbi Yochanan holds that you can't have a switch from machshava when it comes to tumas ochlin, to make something makabel tumas ochlin, when it's attached to the ground, Rabbi Yochanan will agree that for meiser purposes, a machshava that you have when the item is attached to the ground is still called a machshava. What does this mean? Here we go. This nan. Hasiya v'ha'ezo v'ha'karana shebechatzer. So we'll say, these are all items that are herbs, right? All of these herbs that are in the chatzar, im hayu nishmarin chayavin. If Rabbi say ultimately again they are guarded, meaning if they're growing in a secure place, then ultimately again they are chayiv in meiser. They're chayiv in meiser. Sehechi dami. What's the case over here? If you say that they were planted for human consumption, does it need to be said that they're chayiv in meiser? Of course, anything that's planted for human consumption is chayiv in meiser. I'll say, assuming that it conforms to the criteria that we learned yesterday. Rather, what must be the case? Initially, you planted these items to feed it to your animal. And what does it say? Vikatani im haya nishmarin chayavin. So we'll say, even though halacha l'maisa it says that I planted it for human consumption, nevertheless, rather I planted it for animal consumption. And what happened? It says im hayu nishmarin chayavin. If I'm guarding it, ultimately, again, it is chayiv. Now, just the way the Gemara is understanding that is, what is it for hayu nishmarin? Hayu nishmar means I have a switch, ultimately, again, in my machshavas, and now I decide that I'm going to use it myself. So you see over here that what? That even a switch in machshava, when something is mechuber lekarka, has ramifications vis-a-vis meiser. Rav Ash says, no. What's the case? Hacha b'chatzer sha'alu me'elehen. They both say the case over here is where what? These herbs sprouted on their own. They sprouted on their own. Vistama li adam kaimi. And I will say in general, these herbs are mostly used, these type of herbs are mostly used for human consumption. V'hachi kamar. And this is what it means to say. Ema chatzer mishmeres. But say if the chatzer ultimately again is guarded, peroseha chayavin. Then ultimately again the produce that grows will be chayav in meiser. Ve'im lav. But if not, ultimately, again, meaning if the chatzar is not guarded, then Rabbi say p'turin. So Rabbi say, so therefore, again, what we're dealing with over here is something different than what we thought originally. We're dealing with the type of herbs that are normally consumed by people. And what does the Brisa teaching me? Because it's normally consumed by people, therefore, again, if it's growing in a place that is secure, then ultimately we call that human food. and therefore chayiv in meiser. If the meiser is growing in a place that's not secure, then halacha l'maisa, then it's more like hefker, right? And therefore, again, it's not chayiv in meiser. Good. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, Maser Rav Ashi, Kol shechayavin b'meisus mitamid tumas ochlin. Well, it's a very interesting statement. Rav Ashi brings up the following discussion. Anything that is chayiv in meiser, mitamid tumas ochlin, ultimately again contracts tumas ochlin. V'im is, so Gemara says as well, say v'im isa. So we'll say now Rav Ashi's statement makes sense. Rav Ashi is saying if it's chayiv in meiser, that means it's ochel. If it's ochel, then it's subject to tumas ochlin. If it's not chayiv in meiser, it's not ochel. Therefore, if it's not ochel, it's not ultimately mekabel tumas ochlin. So Gemara says, 1 second. Ve'im isa ha'ika hani dichayavin b'meiser ve'in metamin tumas ochlin. But 1 second. What about according to our discussion? Look at Rashi. Ve'im isa dile'inyan meiser havi machshava ha'ika ulshin shezar lebehema v'nimlach alein la'adam. We'll say, watch this. That's not necessarily true. We'll say, what case seems to go against this? Ulshin. What did we say about ulshin? If you planted ulshin for behema, and then you have a switch in your machshava, right? That now you're going to eat it yourself. So we'll say, what's the halacha? What's the halacha? It's not mekabel tumas ochlin until when? Until you detach it and have a switch in machshava. Yet, it is chayiv in meiser. So I do have a case of an item that is not mekabel tumas ochlin, but yet ultimately again is subject to meiser. This is what it means to say. Kol min shechayev b'meiser mitame tumas ochlin. So I'll say, so Rav says as follows. Rav Ashi was, this statement is really saying as follows. This statement is not talking about particular items, rather it's talking about species. Any species, any type of food item that ultimately, again, is chayiv in meiser, is metame tumas ochlin. There certainly could be cases where a specific circumstance, that principle may not be true, but halacha l'maisa in general, generally speaking, anything, any type of food, species of food that is subject ultimately to meiser is chayiv is subject to tumas ochlin. Good. So the Gemara says, "Hachinai mistar midiktani seifa kol shechay bereishis hagaz chaymatas." We'll see this Mishnah. Any animal that is subject to reishis hagaz. Remember again, reishis hagaz is the halacha that says when you shear your animal, you must give of the some of the first shearings to the Kohen. So any animal that is subject to reishis hagaz is also subject to matanos, right? Also matanos are that you have to give the zra, the lechayim, the keva, the foreleg, the chest, the stomach to the Kohen. So the Gemara says, "V'yeshechayim matanos." Yet there are some animals that are chayiv in matanos, ve'eno chayiv bereishis hagaz, but yet are not subject ultimately again to the obligation of first shearings. V'misa, and if this is true, ika treifa. Both say there is the case of treifa. What's the halacha? We're going to see this later. What's the case of treifa? The chayeves bereishis hagaz. So we'll say obviously a treifa. When your treifa animal is alive, if you shear it, you are chayiv to give to the Kohen of the first shearings. Ve'ina chayeves b'matanos. Yet, interestingly enough, a treifa, of course, is not subject to matanos. Which also is obviously, right? The treifa is not kosher. So halacha l'maaseh, if you shech the treifa, you're not obligated to give those matanos to the Kohen. Ravina Hamani, whose opinion does this reflect? Rabbi Shimon, this is Rabbi Shimon. This is not Rabbi Shimon. Poter es ha-treifa mereishes hagaz. Rabbi Shimon actually says that a treifa is not subject to the halachos of reishes hagaz as well. Okay, I'm going to see Barashi. Tashma hamafkir es karmo. Well, this is an interesting case. Person is mafkir his kerem, right? He's mafkir ultimately again his vineyard. So what happens? Vehishkim baboker, and he wakes up the next morning, and what does he do? Ubatzro. He goes and he harvests the grapes from the very vineyard that he owned, but he was now mafkir. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, just because it's hefker, meaning just even though he was the owner and he was mafkir it, just because he was the owner who was mafkir, it doesn't give him rights in it. He has rights like everyone else. So what's the however, when he goes ahead and he harvests it, chayiv beperet ubaololos b'shichacho b'peah. So interestingly enough, he is chayiv to observe the laws that normally apply to a vineyard, right? Peret and olulos, which Rabbi say refers to leaving certain grapes or clusters behind. Shichacha, right? The halachos of dropping certain clusters and leaving them. Peah, leaving a corner unharvested. Upatra min ha-meiser. Rabbi say ultimately again he is pater from meiser. Rabbi say, and this goes back to yesterday's daf. Why is he pater from meiser? Because one of the criteria for meiser is what? Nishmar, right? That ultimately, again, it's quote unquote a guarded field, an owned field. But if you are collecting produce from a sdei hefker, from an ownerless field, it's not subject to meiser. So, interestingly enough, when he harvests these grapes, so he's chayiv to all of the halachos that are unique to grapes. But ultimately, again, not chayiv in meiser. But we learned kol shechai b'peah chai b'meisus. But we learned that halacha l'meiser, any time that you're subject to peah, you're automatically subject to meiser, and here you are obligated to leave peah. Elav shmamina min katani shmamina. See, this is actually very important. When the Mishnah says this statement, for example, anything that is chayiv in peah is chayiv in meiser. Rabbi say, what does that mean? What does that refer to when it says kol? What it's referring to is species, right? I don't know if species is the right word, but you understand what I mean. Any species or type of produce that is subject to the halachos of peah is subject ultimately again to the halachos of meiser. But obviously within those species you could construct a case where the principle will not be true. So I'll say, so what we're talking about over here is we're talking about what types of produce, what types of growth, so any type of growth in general that is subject to peah will be subject to meiser. So for example, I will say, bread doesn't come into that category. Why? Bread is a species that is not subject to peah. I mean, bread is like a loaf. It's not subject to peah. Therefore, again, it's not subject to meiser. But I will say, grain, which is subject to peah, right, will be subject to meiser. Can you construct a case using grain where the principle will not be true? Of course. And that's where the Gemara got a little bit hung up on. You see, we thought that what the Mishnah was saying is any case where ultimately, again, or I should say, any case involving grain should always satisfy this principle. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying we know very well that you could always construct a case that goes against an established principle. You could always do that, manipulate the circumstances enough. So rather what the Gemara is saying is min katani. We're talking about principles that apply to species. So in general, any species to which is obligated in peah, ultimately again will be obligated in meiser. Can you construct cases where the metzias is not like that? Of course. But we're talking about the types and species, not about every single case. Good. Tanan Hasam. We'll say we go weiter. Tanan Hasam. Modu Chamlu Rabbi Akiva. Very interesting case. Bizoreya. The Chamagrit Rabbi Akiva in the following case, right, which is as follows. Bizoreya, so let's remember again, this is talking about, we saw this machlokes yesterday. We'll see it again now. Bizoreya sheves o chardal b'shnayim u'shalosh makamos shenosein pia mikol echad v'echad. Let's listen to this. You're planting, sheves is dill, right, and chardal is mustard seed. So if I'm planting dill or mustard seed, and what I've done about this is actually interesting. Rashi points this out as well, that apparently what they used to do with dill or mustard seed was that if you had a field that you were planting something else in, and you had a couple of patches of unused soil, you would plant your mustard or your dill in those unused patches. So that's why it brings up over here, let's say you have mustard or dill in like 3 or 4 different spots throughout your field. So what do? Shenosin peah mikol echad ve'echad. Let's say each and every spot gets its own peah. So the Gemara says, Amud Beis, I v'ha sheves de mechayiv bepeah u'mechayiv b'meiser. But yes, 1 second, I will say that remember, sheves, dill, is something that is chayiv in peah, and therefore again should be subject to meiser. Remember again, that's our principle, right? Our principle is whatever is obligated in peah is obligated in meiser. So now you're telling me that dill is obligated in peah. If it's okay, fine. So therefore again, that means you have to take meiser from dill as well. So the Gemara says this nan kol shechayiv bepeah chayiv b'meiser. Because after all, we learned this. We'll say anything that is chayiv in meiser is chayiv in peah. I'm sorry. Thank you. Anything that is chayiv in peah is chayiv in meiser. Umin dechayiv b'meiser. And we'll say, now remember again. So that principle we know. Anything that is chayiv in peah is chayiv in meiser. Dill is chayiv in peah, as we just saw. You take peah from every dill patch, right there for chayiv in meiser. Now 1 second. Let's extend that. Umi dechayiv b'meiser. And I both say, now the other thing that we've established on the previous staff is that if you're chayiv in meiser, mitame tumas ochlin, which will say makes sense. If you're chayiv in meiser, then you're mitame, then you're subject to tumas ochlin. Why Rabbi say makes sense? Because meiser only applies to what? Only applies to what? Ochel, food. So therefore, if you're ochel legabe meiser purposes, then halacha lemaisa, you should be mekabel tumas ochlin as well. Fine, that all makes sense. But now we have a problem. Alma. So we'll say now. What's interesting about dill? Dill is not really a food item. What is dill? It's an herb, meaning it's a spice, right? So therefore, you see something very important over here. Alma kol mili da'avid l'taima mitame tumas ochlin. Suppose you see something very interesting here, which is anything that is used for flavor purposes still has a din of ochel. Therefore, again, the sheves l'taima avida, because remember again, everyone knows dill is used for flavor. Dill is used for flavor. So we'll say, so something quite fascinating just happened over here. So first of all, we just applied two principles that we've been working with. Number one, anything that is subject to payah is subject to meiser, and anything that is subject to meiser, ultimately again is subject to tumas ochlin. So now, what did we just see? Everyone agrees that if you have dill planted in 2 or 3 different spots in your field, we'll say, what do you do legabe payah? What's the halacha for payah? Payah from each patch. Great. Payah from, that's fine. Everybody agrees. Payah from each patch. If sheves is subject to payah, that means ultimately, again, it's subject to meiser. If it's subject to meiser, that means it's food. If it's food, then it contracts what? Or is susceptible to what? Tumas ochlin. Wow, new principle. I always thought that tumas ochlin only applies to what? Something that is called ochel. But yet, what do we see over here? That Allah Kalamaisa, even something that is used for flavor is called an ochel, and therefore subject to tumas ochlin. Incredible. To which the Gemara says, really? Or minhi. The Gemara says, let's talk about this. Hakosht v'achimum v'rashe b'samim v'ateya v'achilsis v'apalpalim v'chalas charia. So I'll say these are all examples of different spices. And when I say spices, these are all items ultimately again that are used for flavor. So the Gemara says, all of these items, nikhin bekesef meiser, is actually very interesting. You can use meiser sheni money to purchase them. Ve'in metamin tumas ochlin. But ultimately, again, they are not metame tumas ochlin. Div Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say this is actually quite fascinating. So you could use meiser sheni. We'll say, so remember again, let's talk about this just a moment. Meiser sheni money. So remember again, meiser sheni is produce, right? It's produce. What do you have to do with meiser sheni? Who gets to eat meiser sheni? You get to eat your meiser sheni. With one caveat, where do you have to eat it? In Yerushalayim. So we'll say, so again, remember, how does this work? Baruch Hashem, I have too much produce to transport up to Yerushalayim. So what do? I redeem my meiser sheni for money, take my money up to Yerushalayim, and what? With one caveat, what do I spend my money on? Food. That's what I can spend my money on. So we'll say, now something very interesting. So now I come to Yerushalayim with my meiser sheni money. So Rabbi Akiva says that halacha l'maisa, I can use meiser sheni money on spices, on items that are used to flavor. However, Rabbi Akiva says these spices are not mekabel tumas ochlin. Amar lo, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Rabbi Akiva, what are you talking about? Em nichin bekesef meiser mipnei ma in metamin tumas ochlin. Vim einon metamin af heim lo yilkechu bekesef meiser. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Akiva, what are you talking about? B'manav shach. If you can use meiser sheni money to purchase spices, then what? Then it's food, right? But if it's food, then it should be mekabel tumas ochlin. And if you're going to tell me that it's not mekabel tumas ochlin, then it's not food. And if it's not food, then what? You can't use meiser sheni money to purchase it. So what's going on over here? Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, nimnu v'gamru. The rabbis decided she'ein nichin bekesef meiser ve'ein metamin tumas ochlin. The inachinami will say you cannot use meiser sheni to purchase spices or flavor agents, right? You can't use meiser sheni money to purchase flavor agents, and not only that, they're not mekabel tuma. So we'll say items used for flavor don't have the din of ochel. They don't have the din of ochel. Therefore, again, you cannot use meiser sheni money to purchase it, and ultimately, again, therefore, by extension, it's not mekabel tumas ochlin. So I'll say, so remember again, let's go back. Now we have a problem. What's our problem, Bosai? Our problem ultimately is that we just said before that halacha l'maisa, sheves, what did we say about dill? That ultimately, again, dill is subject to payah. If it's subject to payah, it's subject to meiser. And if it's subject to meiser, it is subject to mas ochlin. What did we learn from there? That any item da'avid l'taima, any item that is used for flavor, ultimately does have the status of ochel, does have the status of food. What did we just see? That ultimately the rabbis got together and they said any item that is used for flavor does not have the status of food. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda says, no. The dill case is not a contradiction. The dill case is a different. Why? Kitanyahi b'sheves haru'uya lekimach. What type of dill are we talking about? The type of dill that is used in kusach. I will say we have not spoken about kusach, everyone's favorite dish, right? Made from curdled milk and moldy bread, right? Builds up the immune system, right? I will say so. This was a dip, and it was a dip that ultimately, again, was a very chashuv of food. Apparently, a primary ingredient in kusach is dill. Look at Rashi. The Gemara calls it kamach. Rashi says kamach. The kochin osa v'nostin osa bekusach v'karo shebesocha matbilin kol ochal the high lav letaima avid ha'ikar. So we'll say, interestingly enough, dill was one of the primary ingredients in kusach. So whereas dill is normally used as a flavor agent, in kusach it is used as what? A primary ingredient. So we'll say, so when we said before that halacha l'maisa, dill is subject to payah, which is subject to meiser, which is therefore subject to mas ochlin as the din of ochal, that's dill used for a particular purpose. That's kusach dill. Kusach dill einachinami is a primary ingredient, but it could very well be that in other circumstances where dill is used as a flavoring agent, then halacha l'maisa does not have the din of ochel and will not be subject to mas ochlin. Amar Rav Ashi, Amrisa l'shmaite kamed Rav Kahana. So Rashi said, I said over my this teaching in front of Rav Kahana. Amar lo tema b'sheves hasuy lekamach hastam lekadera. So we'll say, so now, well, here's what's interesting about this. The way this kind of reads is that we're talking about a special type of shev, a special type of dill that is used for kusach. But in general, dill is considered to be a flavoring agent, and therefore, again, not subject to mas ochlin. Rather, read it differently. Elastam sheves lekemach asuya. Now, that I will say, interestingly enough, historically, the primary use for dill was what? Kusach. Therefore, I will say, dill really had an identity not as a flavoring agent. It really was not really looked at as what we call a milsa da'avida l'taima, an item who's really used for flavoring. Rather, again, the primary use for kusach the primary use for sheves, for dill historically, was in kusach, which gave it the identity of like a primary food item. That's why, again, it's subject to payah, subject to meiser, and therefore subject to mas ochlin. This nan hasheves mishanasna tam b'kedera ein ba mishum truma ve'ena matamet to mas ochlin. So also listen to this. Interestingly enough, sheves, right, dill, if you went ahead and you introduced it into a pot in order to give flavor, it's no longer subject to truma. Now, boss, what is it talking about? Look at Rashi. Ein ba mishum truma shem chazer hakelach v'nafal l'soch kedera shel chulin. That ultimately, again, if this piece of, or this leaf of sheves were to go ahead and to fall into a kedera of chulin, it does not create a dimua situation. And it doesn't convey tumas ochlin. Ha'achlo nasna tam bekedera yesh ba mishum truma o metame tumas ochlin. V'sagaday trastama lekedera kilo nasna nami stama lekedera elalav shmamina stama lekmach asuy shmayna. I will say, so learn out from this case that it doesn't go ahead and convey a problematic truma situation. That stam sheva, stam dill, was ultimately used for kusach. So I will say, so interestingly enough, what comes out from here is as follows. So first, I will say, the way we paskin is that the Rambam paskin is that halacha l'maisa. Let's work backwards a little bit. That for meiser sheni purposes, I will say, you cannot use meiser sheni on flavoring agents. right? Meiser Sheni money can only be used for primary food items, not for flavoring. So interestingly enough, when you went to Yerushalayim and you used your Meiser Sheni money, you could use it for primary food items, but any spices or anything else that you wanted to purchase, you had to purchase ultimately again from your own money. That's interesting, did my Meiser Sheni. Similarly again, Abba said, we will say items, food items, right? Spices, herbs that are used really for flavoring purposes do not have a din of ochel, right? Do not have a din of ochel, and therefore again will not be subject to tumas ochlin. But interestingly enough, we see what's the exception to this rule. Not the exception. Historically, we learn something amazing about Sheves, dill, right? That apparently the primary use for dill, at least Bismana Gemara, was for what? Was for kusach. That gave dill not the identity as a flavoring agent, but ultimately, again, a din of ochel. And I will say that is why before we said that dill, right, dill, even if it's planted in multiple patches, will be subject to what? Peah, right? Peah is a din in ochel. Because it's subject to peah, therefore it's subject to what? Meiser, which is a din of ochel. And because it's subject to meiser, it's subject to tumas ochlin, which is a din in ochel. But I both say, do not learn out from sheves to other items which convey flavor, because sheves is the exception. Sheves, although we look at dill as a flavoring agent, in fact does not have an identity as a flavoring agent, rather as a primary food item. Incredible. Says the Mishnah. We'll say, continuing in this theme, kol shechai b'reishas agaz chai b'matanas. Any animal that is subject to the obligation of shearings, first shearings. Also, whenever you shear your animal, you have to give some of the shearings to the Kohen. It's chayv matanas. If you shecht that animal, you're chayv to give the zroa, the lechayim, and the keva, right? The foreleg, right? The foreleg, the chest, and the stomach to the Kohen. The yesh chayv matanas. I will say, but there are some animals that are chayv matanas. Vein chayv reishas agaz, but yet are not subject to the halachos of first shearings. Similarly, kol sheyesh lo biur, yesh lo shis. We'll say the halacha of biur says as follows. During the Shemitah year where everything becomes hefker, if you want to store produce in your home, you can do so. As long as what? As long as what? That very same produce is available to everyone else in the fields. Once it is no longer available in the fields, you cannot store it inside of your house. So kol sheyesh lo biur, yesh lo shvius. The yesh sheyesh, so anything that is subject to beer is subject to shmita. The yesh sheyesh lo shvius ve'en lo beer. But there are certain items that are subject to shmita, but not subject ultimately again to beer. Kigon. So we'll say. So what are examples of this? Kigon, Allah haluf. Allah haluf shota v'hindandina sheyesh lo shvius ve'en lo beer. We'll say these items. These are actually different types of herbs as well that ultimately again are subject to the halachos of shmita, but are not subject to the obligation of beer. Ikar haluf shota v'ikar hindanda. So we'll say, but again, the root of the luf plant, the root of the hindandina, dichsev ulehemtecha lechaya shebe'artzcha tiya kol tvasa lechol. Kol zman shechaya ocheles min asada atamachil behemtecha. We'll say, as long as, by shmita, as long as ultimately again, the animal is able to eat from it in the field, you are permitted to give it to your animal in the home. Once, however, it is no longer available to the animals of the field, ultimately, again, you can't store it for the animals in your home. Vahani lo kalalu. Rabbi say, but some of these items mentioned never really disappear. Why? Because they're roots that are embedded in the ground. See, when the animal eats of it, the animal eats from the growth that grows on top, but doesn't get to the root. So therefore, again, they're perpetually available to the animals in the field, and therefore you could continue to feed it or to store it for your animal in the home. Good. Says the Mishnah. I will say, interesting Mishnah. Any fish that has scales automatically has fins. V'yesh sheyesh lo. Snapir ve'inlo kaskesas. So we'll say if it has scales, it automatically has fins. But yet there are fish that have fins, but do not necessarily have scales. Kol sheyesh lo karnaim yesh lo tlafayim. Any animal that has horns automatically has split hooves. V'yesh sheyesh lo tlafayim ve'inlo karnaim. But I will say ultimately again, there are animals that have split hooves, but do not necessarily have horns. So let's analyze this. Says the Gemara, Kol sheyesh lo kaskesas daktar. We'll say, so what it's telling me is as follows. It's actually quite interesting. Any fish that has scales, by definition, is a kosher fish. Because what did the Mishnah say? If it has scales, it automatically has fins. Sheyesh lo snapir ve'ein lo kaskesas dag tameh. But Rabbi say there are animals that have fins that don't. There are fish that have fins but don't have scales. So Rabbi say therefore a fish that has fins but doesn't have scales, it's not a kosher fish. To which the Gemara says, so you see something very interesting. Midi anan akaskesas samchinon. Snapir de kasev rachman alam. So we'll say, so you see that at the end of the day, it's very interesting. We normally say that the determinant for a kosher fish is what? Fins and scales. But in reality, what is it? It's just scales. It's just scales. So we'll say, so if it has scales, it has fins. So just tell me in the Torah, any fish that has scales is kosher. So why do I need snapir? Why does the Torah even have to speak about fins? This is actually quite interesting. Ilo kasav rachmana snapir, because had the Torah not mentioned fins, hava amina mai kaskeses tichsiv snapir. We'll say, interestingly enough, the Torah says snapir v'kaskeses. So now that it mentions both, I know that one of them is fins, one of them is scales. Had the Torah just mentioned snapir, had the Torah just mentioned kaskeses, I might have thought kaskeses means what? Maybe kaskeses means fins. Va'afilu dag tame kasev, va'afilu dag tame. And therefore I would come to permit even non-kosher fish. Kasev rachmana snapir v'kaskeses. V'hashta de kasev rachmana snapir v'kaskeses. So I'll say now the Torah writes both. So now I know snapir is fins, kaskeses are scales. So how do I know that? Minolan de kaskeses levushu. How do I know that the word kaskeses ultimately again means scales? Oh, because I have another proof. Tichsiv v'shiryon kaskasim hu lavush. Because it was interestingly enough, the Navi, when actually talking about Goliath, right, Goliath, says that what did he wear? Shiryon kaskasim, which of us say we know means a coat of armor. How was armor made in those times, right? It was pieces of metal that flapped one on top of the other. That resembled what? Resembled the scales of a fish. V'lichtov rachmana kaskeses v'lo ba'isnap here. But now back to the previous question. If I know that kaskeses means scales, then why not go ahead and just write kaskeses and leave out snapir? Amr Avo v'chein tanad Rabbi Shmuel yagdil Torah v'yadir. So I'll say, so actually quite beautiful. Yadir means literally again, Torah will increase, Torah will get larger and become even more beautiful. Which I will say seems to mean over here in this context that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to go ahead and write the Torah in such a way which would try to avoid any unnecessary ambiguity. Now the truth is, the Torah is filled with incredible ambiguity by intention. Right, intentionally left that way in order for allow this interface between Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. But apparently in this particular area, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not. Therefore, although technically speaking, the determinant for a kosher fish is in fact what? Is in fact scales, but again, in order to be clear that it's fins and scales, and that kaskeses means scales and not fins, the Torah writes both snapir v'kaskeses. All right, we'll stop over here. I'll record the parsha thought to Mir.